ecosystem. This is the fifth of our webinars during this interim time frame that we're living through right now. We will have two more after this one. The first, interestingly, now that we've done them, two of them have been about funding, where we talked about the PPP and the EIDL funding, and another one we talked about alternative lending, such as through the community development financial institutions and credit unions. and then two of our workshops or webinars have been about kind of tactics that business owners can take to best utilize the changes in the laws. One of which had to do with employees and the emergency family leave changes and and how the companies need to prepare for that. And then we had another one about the tax changes and how to kind of tax relief that we can get, but also how to make sure that we are doing our record keeping and our accounting appropriately so that we don't get in trouble come springtime or first quarter of next year. So, but here we are today, changing topics substantially, and we're going into the more softer fields and talking about mental health and how do we as support providers and people who work directly with entrepreneurs or have entrepreneurs as clients, how do we help them manage through this these uncertain times, changes, consistent changes, but also how do we help advise them to work best with their employees as their employees and co-workers or co-owners start to move back into a workplace. So we will have Elizabeth Freeman talk about that in just a little bit. So, but I'm going to go over some administrative things first. As always, if you have questions, please go to the bottom of your screen and you will see the little chat bubble. Click on that and add any question and ask any questions that you have in that. Dean Hebel is here and he will manage all of that at the end of our conversation today. But also, since we're here and we have some new faces, I would like for you to please also use the chat to introduce yourself and why this topic is of particular interest to you. So that's two things to do with the chat. One, introduce yourself, and two, use it to ask questions for later. And then we're also using our just regular meeting view so that you have the option of seeing just the speaker or either seeing all the people in the room. You also have the option of turning your video on so people can see you or turning it off. Right now, all of the microphones are muted, but if you want to unmute yourself, you are welcome to do that as well. If you have questions, just put in your chat room how to do that, and I believe Justine will be able to help you with that. But let's see, a few more administrative things. Our next two meetings on the 5th of May will be with an economist from Clemson who's going to talk about what they see as the picture going forward. So now we're looking at, okay, what happens next, and kind of what economists are thinking in terms of how to best prepare. And then the last one, which will be May 12th, we're just going to have a roundtable. We're going to get together and all our microphones will be off and we can all talk and we can ask each other questions. We can see how things are working with each other, what lessons we've learned, and what kind of resources that we might need going forward. And then we also have a meeting planned. Our regular quarterly meeting is planned for May 12th, I believe, as well, somewhere in there, but we're going to move that to June 25th. That's a Thursday. We hope that we will all be able to get together in the same room and see each other and talk about all that we have done in our homes for the past few months. So put that on your calendar for June 25th. For those of you who have not joined us before, those are meetings where we get together, we talk with each other, we learn from each other, and usually there's a topic and this particular topic was originally scheduled to be mentoring programs, and what are the different ways to mentor entrepreneurs and how to best facilitate one of those within your particular entrepreneur support program. We are considering changing the topic depending on everyone's interest in what's next. So, we're being flexible like everyone else. But let's see. As always, we have sponsors for this programming that we need to thank. We have Ogletree Deacons, and we're very lucky to have Michael Nail speak for us about the employees. We have Trejo Corporation, Furman University, and Intellinet. So got to give them a shout out too. Let's see. Dean, anything else? Justine? No? All right. Well, I have to unfortunately sign off today. I have to go put my mentoring hat on, as a matter of fact. And I have to apologize for last week for dropping out unexpectedly. For those of you who were on, our power went out and everything just shut off. It came back on at 2 o'clock in the morning. It seemed that a tree had fallen on some lines in the back, and we heard three of the things just, it was just a mess. I'll just say that. So, but thank goodness it wasn't cold and it wasn't hot, and we could just have a dinner by candlelight on the back deck. But y'all, thank you so much, and enjoy Beth. She is exactly the right person to talk about this topic with you. So y'all have a wonderful time, and thank you.
Thank you, Erin.
All right, I guess with that, I will turn it over, Beth, to you, and we appreciate, again, your time today, and the floor is yours.
Well, Dean, Erin, Justine, and group, thank you very much for having me today. I look forward to putting this presentation together with you, and we can go ahead and get started. Next slide. I want to introduce myself to you. I am an instructor in the Department of Psychology with USC Upstate. I've been with them 17 years, and my specialty for the university in the Upstate area is both applied and industrial organizational psychology. I come to you with my professional training from Bowling Green State University, one of the top 3 programs in the country, and also from Clemson University. And we're only a little bit biased about that. So as you can see, I am a mixed house blended, coming from a number of different institutions, and with that as the background, and also giving you a quick inside reason for having an up mental attitude today. We just finished a course and finished the final exam for 2 down and 2 more to go. So next slide, please. I want to talk to you today about how you can support mental health in the new normal for all of our workplaces. Now, Erin and Justine helped coach me a little bit to let me know about the audience being entrepreneurially oriented. And I want you to know that I have some very special feelings toward entrepreneurs, small businesses, and also our larger corporate world as well. I like both the flat organizations, the matrixed organizations, as well as our more standard bureaucracies, and I'll bring you experience to all of those. But that's all of our background. Let's talk today about mental health, specifically in the new norm. Next slide. The frames of reference for the presentation for you. We have a pre-pandemic perspective primarily. And it is fascinating that all of us have been cast into this position of being in a great social psychological experiment that none of us actually were asked whether or not we wanted to participate in. We simply found ourselves in it, and we have a tendency to look back on how mental health was, how we are doing right now during our quarantine and our social distancing practicing, but we're really focused on what do we do next? What is our new normal going to be like? So with those three perspectives, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. And we'll talk and think back. We will give credit and we will acknowledge the fact that pre-pandemically, we think of those as our very personal good old days, where we understood that mental health was about balance, balancing our lives, balancing business operation needs, and balancing the lives of our employees. And when we had and could find that sweet spot where the two overlapped, that's where we found our most productive, our most pleasant work experiences, our most profitable experiences. And the idea was to be able to blend both business needs and employees' lives and lifestyles such that both aspects balanced out and experienced the best possible outcomes. Next slide. Well, we measured and we could assess how well we were doing pre-pandemic mental health based on how productive our employees were, how profitable were our efforts, what did our balance sheet looks like. If we were not yet to a point entrepreneurial of having hit that sweet spot of finding our profits out in the workplace, then what we would look at was percentage of market share. How many customers? What was our percentage of increase? How about the people who were being attracted to us? Were the people we were employing satisfied, happy, contributing? Were we able to rely on them? And what about the people we engaged with? Did we see a steady flow coming in? So these indicators were fairly clear to us. We had no questions about it. And the idea is that in the new normal, how do we get back to it? How do we prepare for it? Next slide. Well, right now we're currently in our quarantine social distancing aspect of this three-phase process. And we've tried to find and are clarifying what our mental health balance means at this point. And when I was preparing the presentation for you today, I tried to sit back and reflect for just a minute to see what this, for me at this point, almost 7 weeks of this social distancing, simply because of random timing. We had spring break, and the spring break tended to be the first week of isolation and a need to calm down, and then we never got back to engaging. So we had to define what it meant. What on our operations from the university's perspective, for example, or for other organizations, we have a need to be present for ourselves, present for our job responsibilities, present for our ongoing planning for getting ready for the next stages, a need to hang in there, to persevere, to be able to withstand, to be resilient, if we want to use current terminologies. We also have this very instinctual reaction of, hey guys, we need to survive. We need our students to be happy. We need our clients to be coming in the door. We need our customers to be loyal to us. We need our employees to stay calm and focused. And yet, it's all very personal to us too. We have a need to be separated from people, not because we choose to be, but because that is how we are balancing our need to stay healthy and our need to be present. So we are separate yet present virtually for all of our pressures that we are experiencing now. That does not mean we don't need to be supported, though. We do. We need to be supported. And so we are trying to find that human connection via our virtual engagements. And to a certain extent, we find it pleasant, unique, something different. And for those who are well versed in it, it may just be one more routine activity, and you really miss the human element of touch, being able to give someone a smile in person without feeling like, oh, I'm invading their airspace. Not just the concept of personal space, but I have to breathe in and out, and so do you. We're sharing the same air here. Are we okay with that? that feeds into our need to survive as persons. So we have needs to survive professionally, for our organizations, for our entrepreneurial ventures. We have a need to survive personally. This is where we are today. And we know it, we accept it, but we need to move forward. So next slide. With our next slide and preparing to move, sorry, don't take me literally there, Justine, slip up there. As we are practicing our mental health indicators and the way we assess how well we are doing, how many of you are counting how many times a day you're washing your hands? You know, after a while, I thought, oh dear, I am so worried that people are going to now develop an obsessive compulsion to be washing their hands all of the time, and I'm worried about what the newest diagnosis is going to be for most frequently occurring psychological disorders. So yeah, let's be careful with our balancing our hygiene needs with the practices of what's practical here. Our access to material goods, to our groceries, to our service providers. How are we balancing that with the needs that we've had placed on us? How are we practicing what we know to be good mental hygiene practices? Are we taking time out to breathe regularly, to try to clear our minds? What are we doing to focus on tasks at hand without worrying about the things in the background? Are we able to control our inner voices and to encourage ourselves? What are we doing for distraction? I'm very happy to report that one of the positive outcomes for this unplanned major life change that everyone is experiencing is that when I go outside now, I see more families actively engaged in just being together. I see kids out on roller skates and bicycles, and they are laughing. They are having so much fun. And then I look at the adults around them. They are laughing. They are having fun. And that gives heart. It also increases our hope. And then when I go back inside to sit down back again at the terminal to run the next class, I feel at peace. I have a new definition of what it means to be productive. It means the patience and the engagement that we are going forward with. Okay, next slide. So here we are getting ready, planning, preparing for the new normal when we return to work. And our definition then of how do we define mental health and balance in our new normal? Well, we will have, again, a very intense need to compete, a need to make up for lost time, a need to continue to produce, to provide our goods and services. And how will we do this? How will we attract our people back in to our typical work environment? How do we get people to focus again on work? Are we going to try to encourage them to separate home life and work life? Are we going to try to merge the two together again? Thinking about it on a personal level, how are we going to adjust back and forth and back and forth from what we were doing before to what we need to do now, to what we need to do as we move through a world of recognition that pandemic can happen. And the fact that we don't really know when we will define the pandemic as having been finished. If it has happened once, will it happen again? If so, will it be further out in the future, hundreds of years out, or are we going to look at this in terms of a 5-year increment? We just don't know. So we have a need to adjust our way of thinking. Personally, we also have a need to engage. I think we will see a very intense positive reaction to being allowed to go back to work. We will see people experience such a relief at being able to resume behaviors with which we are so familiar with that we will sort of overcompensate for a bit till we refine a little bit more of that balanced activity there. But I don't worry about it because we need to thrive. And in thriving, What we mean there is that we feel content, we feel confident, we recognize our competency to blend both our new normal work life and our new normal personal life. Can we, next slide? All right, so how do we achieve our new normal? What do we have to do to get back to work feeling balanced and experiencing our mental health from the new normal perspective? How do we do these things? Next slide. Our first key point is that none of us have all the answers. We have to figure it out together. Those quotation marks, by the way, are from me. You can have this quote. It's one of your takeaways. Anybody who tries to tell you they have all the answers, I would recommend you run fast, as fast as you can, because we are all in it together, whether we want to be or not, whether we experience trust as a natural event when we engage with people, or whether or not we tend to be a little bit more on the skeptical side. We don't have all the answers. We have to figure it out together. Next slide. So our second key point is that I bring back to you the word trust. We are in a position where we must trust our leaders and managers. This is a new environment. It is new for everybody. No one would have caused it intentionally. They would not have stepped out in front and said, hey, I think a pandemic is a really good idea. Let's just see how we can shake up the business world, or let's see how we can shake up everybody's personal lives, and let's throw a little imbalance out there. No, I don't think anybody would have done that. So expecting our leaders and managers to have all the answers, it won't work. We have to trust them, and we have to help them by trusting in them and trusting ourselves that we will be able to adjust. Next slide. So our third key point, if we're going to trust our leaders and we ourselves are going to be trustworthy, then we have to know and display what trust behaviors actually are. And we are by default, by being entrepreneurs, by being new business developers, by being small business owners, by being engaged with the communities around us, by recognizing need in terms of products or services. We are those leaders that everybody's looking to. We are the leaders that we want to trust, and we have to know how to trust each other. So let's talk about how and what trust behaviors include. Next slide. Okay. What are these leader-manager behaviors? Well, that's a really good question, and I hope that some of you will react with chat questions as we go forward. Next slide. So let's start with the three categories of how I conceptualize, from my perspective of where I am in life now, what the three categories of our leader-manager trust behavior should include. First, trusting yourself. Second, being able to trust your team. And third, being able to trust your community. And these are the categories of behaviors, and each have specific behaviors associated with them as well. So let's start with ourselves. Next slide. For yourself, first mantra I'd like for everybody to repeat it as often during the day as you need. You can do this. I can do this. We can do this. Listen to yourself with your whole self. When someone comes up to you and they are stressed, they're anxious, they don't understand what's happening around us, they'd like to have a little more answers, they need to have their faith restored and their ability to succeed. You hear them. You are able, though, to listen with more than your ears. Listen with your whole self. And what does that mean? What it means is that you're using your eyes, you're using your senses, you're hearing, you're seeing. And what you want to do is look at the person or the several people, even if they're 6 feet apart, look at them, but look up when you are listening. Look out. Look forward before you look down again. You're looking up into the person's eyes. You're looking out to see their entire person. Are you engaged with a person who's got their shoulders hunched up and their head in? Are they rigid when they're talking, or are they relaxed, using full body language to communicate? Look forward, because as you're listening to the person ask their question or express the conversation points that they are trying to bring up with you, they're also giving you more information than just the words. So look forward to try to think futuristically about what this person is actually asking you for, or what they are sharing with you, and how you might be able to clarify for them or simply validate that which they are saying and sharing with you. And by the way, when you are being trustworthy, you individually are being trustworthy, it is okay, even in a leadership position, to say that you don't have all the answers, that our outcomes are not yet known, that you would like to have them share their ideas for how to move forward. Ask them. Ask them what they think. Ask them what they need. Ask them what would make the biggest difference immediately, or what they might need going forward. After you have done this, you have listened with your whole self, and you have looked at a person with total concentration. After you've communicated and asked for their ideas, then act with honor and act with confidence. That means saying, this is what I can do right now, and here is when I will do it. This is what I hope to be able to do, and this is when I hope that we will be able to finish it. And if you are genuinely asked for something that you know you cannot do, try not to equivocate. Instead, with total humility, admit, I'm sorry, I don't think I can do that, but I will try in the future if I can. And if I find out that I'm wrong and that I am able to do it for you, then I will. Okay? So these are the behaviors, these are the actions, and this is the way you display that trustworthiness. Next slide. Okay, you're an entrepreneur, or you might be a group of entrepreneurs who have banded together to form a small business. That means that you have a team of players. And I'm going to jump ahead and suggest that while you may be working as a group and you may have collaborators that you don't know really well, that we still have a tendency to think in terms of teams, and so we will treat them as their teams. And so as a team, when you're trusting your team, your mantra becomes, they can do this. And your trust behaviors that you want to engage in are that you do believe in them. Think back to those trust behaviors for yourself. You don't have all the answers, and that's an uncomfortable position to be in. You don't have the answers, but your team and you together probably do. So believe in them. When you believe in them, they will believe back in you. And therefore, you're strengthening your team and you are exhibiting and experiencing trust. Now, if your entrepreneurial venture is just so new that you've not yet had time to establish and build strong relationships or teamwork experiences for which to roll back into or to think back from, draw from, if you will, it might be a good idea at this point to clarify roles. And when you're asking yourself or asking the person with whom you are engaged in what they need, why don't you take the time to clarify roles and say, this is what I think I can do in this position with this team and with each of you. Would each of you please define for me what role you think you can play in helping us move forward and getting things moving once we are allowed to get back into the workforce or allowed to get back into our competitions and our natural business states of affairs. Recognize that as they suggest roles, these roles may be different from what you currently have them in. So allow the roles to change. And if somebody gets into a role that they find that, oh, I thought I could do this, but I can't, be flexible, let them change. Now that sounds kind of like you're going to be a little bit wishy-washy. And we think of leaders as being strong and decisive and moving us forward. Remember that the best leaders execute what we call situational leadership. And that means that you are flexible. You match your leadership style to the circumstances in which you find yourself. So if you need to be the decision maker, then, and you recognize you could be wrong, you simply tell them, this is what I think, this is what we're going to do. If we're wrong, we will admit it and we will make adjustments there. On the other hand, if your team's strong, you have a lot of people that you feel like you rely on, then you say, well, I'd like to hear what you want. I'd like to hear what roles you can play. We get into the position where we find out our roles are not working well, then we will get back together and we will change happily. When you see that your team members are making this extra effort, when your team members are moving you forward in ways that you did not anticipate, you don't resist it. You simply acknowledge it and you praise them and you perhaps redefine their roles again, clarify it. You've shown phenomenal leadership to the team in this effort, so acknowledgement goes a long way. You know, we can't guarantee outcomes in terms of profit at the moment. We simply don't know, but we absolutely can continue to acknowledge effort and recognize effort where it is given. Finally, remember that teamwork works best when everybody is allowed to laugh together. Humor in this time of conflict or in this time of unknowns, I guess is a better way to describe it, is a really powerful way of coping and a very powerful way of being a good leader. I confess that sometimes when I listen to our daily news updates and I see these ongoing press conferences, I'm going, okay, it's seriousness matters, being straightforward matters. But come on, guys, show us a little bit of humility. Show us a little bit of humor and please share the progress that we're making without trying to take personal credit for it. So I think one of the best things that strong leaders do is show self-deprecating humor, appropriate humor, but if they display the humor and you exhibit your humor within your team, then your team is allowed also to laugh. And as they laugh, they gain strength with each other and they begin to see just how utterly ridiculous some of the things that we're doing right now are. We're doing the things we do to cope because we've been guided by people that we respect. But 5 years from now, we are all probably going to laugh at ourselves. And why shouldn't we? So why shouldn't we laugh a little bit now? Continue our good practices, of course, but laugh because what we're doing, it's really kind of funny. All right, next slide. So our third area of trust behaviors that we can engage in is the way we communicate. All right, number one, remember I said it's okay to say that you do not have all the answers, but even if we admit that we don't have all the answers, we should still be reassuring anyway. This is where some of that leadership strength comes in. You may feel like you're quaking inside. You know, it's sort of like the way a lot of people who are giving presentations for the very first time walk into an auditorium with equipment they don't know and a group of people that they've never seen before. And inside they may feel like they are a big bowl of tough Jell-O, but they toughen the Jell-O up a little bit more and they walk in there and they say, all right, ask your questions anyway. We're going to have a great time. It's going to be an intense learning experience. You don't have the answers, but you can help them feel better anyway. So provide reassurance as you can, as best you can. Be very observable to your community and in the way that you are communicating with everybody. Try very hard to make sure that you stay on script if you have an agenda, that as you are making actions to protect your entrepreneurial entity, that you make sure that people can come back behind you and see what you're doing. So let's say you have applied for the payroll protection plan for your small business. Make sure that the people you've done this on their behalf know, today I submitted it. I think we'll get an answer within 48 to 72 hours. If you are not taking advantage of those kind of things, then tell them what you are doing. Well, I have just upgraded all of our operating software so that our telecommunications will be more observable for everybody. In other words, you don't hide your actions. Make sure that people can see what you're doing and in your support for them and the community at large. And it's okay to talk about what your company is doing on behalf of the community. Be sure that as a leader to your community at large, that you share your progress, that you also, if you are experiencing frustrations, that you let your members of your community know, but always turn back around and let them know about the progress that you're making as well. It's sort of the sandwich approach, where if you have to give somebody bad news, you want to start with good news, give them the bad news, and end with good news. When you are trying to be trustworthy, and you are actually trustworthy, you'll tell people about what you've done, which is successful. We have survived for 6 weeks going forward now. We know that we're going to survive for 6 months and 6 years from now. But I won't lie and tell you that we're going to make our profit margin this year. I won't lie and tell you that I think we'll be able to find 5 more people to join our team. But I do believe that in the next 6 months, we'll be able to find 2 more people who can help us. And we might be able to get to a certain slightly lower percentage. And when everybody gets back in, we will be even more successful than we had ever thought. In other words, leaders, you want to be a worker and a doer. Decisions too, but be a worker, be a doer along with your teams. Most of you are entrepreneurially indicated, or you have that natural inclination to be outside the box, to start something new. That's good. So continue and use that and share it. Make the decisions, as I mentioned before, as publicly as possible. Try not to keep secrets at this point, because everybody needs to be as open as possible in order to feel and to observe that trustworthiness. And by the way, I'm not saying that you should disclose your intellectual property. I am talking about our operations and our way to help keep your interpersonal relations within your company going as smoothly as possible. Next slide. All right, for example, trust behavior. This is something that's very observable for people. If you can get your hands on personal protective equipment, like the masks and the gloves, go ahead and hand them out. Model these personal protective equipments as is appropriate. When you do it, that means if you're going to model it, you're going to wear it and you're going to use them. I have been a slow adopter. I will be honest and tell you. I can't quite wrap my own head around the fact that we need to put on masks to go out and be around people. I'm a practicing psychologist. I need to be with people. And when people put barriers on their faces and they take away all of that nonverbal information, I find it disturbing on many different levels. But I am modeling that, and if you find me outside, you won't recognize me because I'll be wearing it, right? That's funny. So you should model it. Don't overdo it though. I would not walk around with equipment that's filtering the air that's being recycled around. And some people are going to get so extreme in this that they will not be wearing the temporary masks or the paper masks or the fun or funny masks. They're going to start with the things that come across their face, and they've got the tubes coming around and they're recycling it and cleaning it and coming, and I'm going, okay, this is like, we're getting into the area of dysfunction and disorder here. Model it, just don't overdo it. Allow your team, your community, your employees to get a little creative with their personal protective equipment. If you're wearing gloves, for example, let them decorate them. Nobody can go out and do their manicure obsessions anymore. Have them manicure their gloves just for humor, for communicating with them. Allow them to practice bringing in work gloves that you have provided, possibly have a day when you have your employees come in, and while we're seeing a lot of decorations happening with masks, let them practice also with the gloves or coming up with other ideas for that. You could also start branding them. Like we wear t-shirts with our brands. Make your personal protective equipment, have your brand on it, and have your, say, ask me about my company. I'm going to talk to you through my mask, but ask me about my company. You can also make this practice of personal protective equipment part of your performance appraisal plans. If you've gotten to that degree of formality within your organizations, it can be one of those line items, one of the tasks, and then people get rated on how well they are showing up with their masks and how long are they keeping their masks with them, and are they remembering to provide the masks to customers who come in the door. And then make it kind of fun. If you've got multiple teams within your small business, go ahead and let them have team competitions to see whose PPE is more brand appropriate than is somebody else's. How many people remember to wear it more hours of a day, or how many people have remembered to share it more often. They'll come up with some really creative ideas for this to happen. Next slide. Another thing that leaders within entrepreneurial companies can do, and again, these things I am suggesting to you as behaviors that can be seen and observed, should always be heard from the perspective is, as it is appropriate and affordable for your particular situations. I know you can't, not everybody can do it for everyone, but to the extent that we can do it for some, we should. If you can pay for internet access or improve the internet access for your employees who are now working from afar, go ahead and do so, because you're probably going to get that productivity time back. For example, the speed of our transmissions, whether or not we're in a 4 gig economy or a 15 gig economy, it can happen. You know? Not all employees have devices which are compatible. Ask, think, and look at those. Teach the skills that they need. For example, I'm not terribly good with these Zoom meetings yet, but each day it gets a little bit better. And to me, that is a practical technology. But assuming that because we are in the 21st century, we know how to do video chats, that's not always the best idea. If you're going to require your employees to work at a distance or to extend our social distancing practices for months at a time, it would pay to sit down and teach your employees what the appropriate background should look like. It pays to tell them, if you're working from home and you have small children, what kind of noise suppressors should you put in place? Maybe you need to bend a little bit and go ahead and let them watch television an extra hour, as long as you've pre-selected the television show so you can get a little bit more productive time that is there. These are the realities of having to accommodate the way we go. So you're teaching the skills, you're giving them bits of wisdom, and also you're teaching them about what it means to be a professional when you're working at a distance. While you're at it, please let me encourage you to think through the security aspects up front instead of after the fact. Don't wait until you've been broken into or your meetings have been interrupted. Figure out how to protect yourself in the beginning. And best practices, think about things like multi-factor authentication, think about the password securities, and think about the levels that are there. There's a lot of free stuff that we can take advantage of that still allow us some securities. Next slide. Okay, logistical support is another trustworthy behavior that sometimes we don't spend enough time letting people know or thinking it through. The logistical support, let's say you're ready to bring people back in to the workforce or into your place of business, and that by bringing them back in your mind, and this is a very natural way to think it through, we'll go back to the way we were. The way we were was pretty good, and it was. But in our new normal, we might have to spend time right now planning how to be more flexible. How many people do we want around us at any one time? How many can we let in at a time? Perhaps what we need to do is think about the density factor. So we might have people working 8 to 10 hours a day, but you don't necessarily have to work them in our traditional frameworks. And what flexibility means will be unique to you and your sets of circumstances, but get beyond the idea of swing shifts. Get beyond the idea of you telecommute and you be a remote worker. Think through all of the different options. And again, going back to that behavior that you as an individual leader can display, ask them what would work and see what they come up with. Be willing to change people's schedules as needed. You do have to have some commitment on your team members' part that there's a core area that you can count on, and make sure that everybody is aware of that it is in writing and shared in person so that there is no miscommunication or misunderstanding there. When and if it is available or needed, provide transportation. If people have to do social distancing and telecommuting for an extended length of time, if their incomes have been negatively impacted long enough, we may find that they don't have the transportation access that they had before. So you might want to think about how to get people where you need them to be and to put together kind of an outgrowth of rideshare services for individuals, but you do it within your own group, not necessarily trying to turn that into another avenue of revenue stream. Give employees guidance for your expectations with regard to their telecommuting performance. So, for example, I am a faculty member, and we found out that we were going to online instruction even if we were teaching traditional classes on the same day that everybody else found out when they announced it on the news. And there was a little bit of good humor which was required, because those of us who had not done that were thinking through, oh my, how much time is it going to take to convert this or to change that or to post this or to run this? And how about the students that we were aware, and I'm going to translate that into your terminology. What about the employees that I am aware of, or the customers I am aware of, who don't have the things that will allow them to live and be served in this particular community? So what kind of logistical adjustments can we make for them? So one of the things we did very first was a communications plan. Here are the expectations. If you cannot meet these expectations, you have to let us know. Reach out to your clients, reach out to your paying customers, reach out to your employees, reach up to the people who are helping fund you, reach down to the people that you want to bring in to your area and guide them. Be intentional about it for what that performance should look like. Next slide. Okay. With these as my backgrounds, I hope that I've opened some communications and some questions for you, and I'm happy to take your questions now.
Great. Thank you very much, Beth. And please, if anyone has questions, let me know through the chat and we will open it up for you. I have a couple to start with, and it gets back, you talked a lot about the trust factor, trusting yourself, trusting leaders, trusting others. But, you know, one of the challenges I think we're having holistically is, and this isn't meant to be derogatory to any, you know, group or person, but we see a lot of mixed messages and different decisions being made that seem to be counterintuitive to each other. How do you deal with that reality, you know, of mixed messages, while also, you know, the reality that we as leaders or individuals, you know, really are, I mean, we don't know the answers. We have to, you know, be willing to believe and trust those who are in leadership positions, but we're hearing such mixed messages. How do you, how do we overcome that?
Let me rephrase your question for a minute to make sure that I am responding correctly. These mixed messages are coming from politicians versus—
Well, not just, well, those who are decision makers, you know, you know, you'll have, you know, reopenings of certain places, and then others saying that you need to, you know, stay inside and have a mask. And I mean, so you're getting these messages that are just counterintuitive to each other, sometimes coming from, you know, the same folks who are in the same groups. And how do we overcome that? I mean, knowing that really no one knows all the answers, but how do we just naturally overcome the desire to, in one sense, reopen the economy, but on the other sense, to that we want to keep everyone safe, but yet the decisions to do those two things aren't always consistent to each other. They're, you know, in some cases, those answers or decisions have to be made to do one or the other, almost are in conflict with each other.
Well, Dean, when I find myself in positions like that, or I'm trying to help people reconcile that you're hearing one thing, but you want to do another, and you recognize that these two things seem to be counterintuitive or opposed to each other, I'm going to look at the situation that I'm in. I'm going to determine what is best for that situation as I know it, as being in a leader or managerial position. And then I'm going to say, this is how we're going to deal with it and go forward. And then I'm going to hope that I've made the right decision and trust in myself that if they are sharing information that doesn't seem to make sense, then it is up to me to make sense of the situation and act accordingly. So we're doing a gradual reopening of the economy. Some states are going for the full thing. Then I look at it and I recognize, well, one governor thinks this, one governor thinks another, one governor thinks this, somebody is on the East Coast, someone's on the West Coast, but we're right here. And we can only deal with that which we can only, we have to deal in a big perspective, but we can only execute where we are right here, right now. And then we have to trust that that is the correct decision. And if it's not, that we have the humility to admit it and change.
And another point, you mentioned earlier about being flexible, which is what you just, I think, described there. And that is definitely something that I think businesses and all of us are having to learn, that flexibility is critical. But yet, I also know that a lot of folks are just in general can be very uncomfortable with things being very flexible and fluent. How do you, if you're one of those folks who likes things to be very concrete and, black and white and very clear, and now we're being told we've got to be flexible, on everything. How do you talk when you work with people who are not typically comfortable being flexible? What's your message to those folks?
To those folks who are uncomfortable with flexibility, I try to provide as much structure as I can. To those who resist structure and like the flexibility, I still try to define what the structural limits are or what the flexibility limits are. And then I wind up with what I would think of as a fuzzy edge. But those who need the structure are going to hang out there in the middle where they don't have to get close to the fuzziness. And those who enjoy the flexibility, they're going to hang out on the outsides of that and will take advantage. As long as the outcome is moving in the direction of our vision and mission for either our small business, large business, or entrepreneurial venture, I have to be at peace and I have to practice my own trust. I will not tell you it's easy, but I will tell you that it is worth it. And that most of the time, the people will live up to your expectations, maybe not on your exact minute by minute timetable, but they have this human need to be heroes. And right now, all of us want to be heroes, but we also want to be protected. And so by being flexible, by providing enough structure, and by trust yourself, trust your team, and trust the community at large, we'll get through it.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Beth. I think this has been very helpful and really putting good perspective. I think some of the different range of feelings and emotions that all of us have been dealing with, and all of our employees and really everybody in the country is dealing with in some way. And so it's been good to have it in some kind of a good perspective around, that it's not it's normal to have a wide range of feelings and concerns and emotions around this time that is very different for all of us. So thank you for putting it in perspective. I will mention to everyone that Beth is going to be give a kind of an abbreviated presentation as part of our TAT chat, not this coming week, but a week from Thursday, I think that's the 7th or 8th of May, so 7th. So we appreciate, Beth, your willingness to be part of that as well. So thank you for your words today. We really appreciate it. And we will have the presentation. It is being recorded, and we will have the information that Beth has provided for everyone as well. Just to wrap up, for next week, as Aaron mentioned, we are going to have Scott Bayer. He is the professor and department chair of the Walker Department of Economics at Clemson University, and he's going to give an update kind of from an economy standpoint, looking at the tea leaves of how things are moving forward with the return to business and everything that's going on. And then we will have one more call the following week on the 12th of this group as well, with a roundtable discussion. And then, as Aaron mentioned, our next quarterly economic entrepreneurial ecosystem meeting will be June 25th. We are hoping that it will be an in-person meeting, but details of that will be coming at a later time. So again, thank you all for being with us today, and we will look forward to sending out the information, including all of Beth's contact information, and we will be back with you at 1 o'clock next Tuesday. So thanks to everyone, and please be safe.
Thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Beth.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Dean.
Thank you. Brian, good to see you.
Good to see you as well.